Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Mind-Boggling Concepts in the Torah. As per usual, put down any sharp objects and don't get too close to the camera. We don't want to spread any of those dangerous diseases. Tonight, we've got a packed Parsha. There's a double Parsha, Aharey and Kedoshim, two incredibly important Parshas in the Torah. It's hard to know actually where to begin. There's so much in here. The first Parsha, Aharey, is quite famous because it's the Parsha that we read on Yom Kippur. But it's not the part of the Parsha you think you'd read on Yom Kippur. It's actually the part on the Parsha where it talks about all the things you're not supposed to do. And it's quite graphic. It's not material for a G audience, but all the relationships you're not supposed to have. And everybody asked the question, I don't know about everybody, I always get bothered when people say that, because I know people that aren't bothered. but a lot of people ask the question, like, why aren't we reading this on Yom Kippur, especially at Mincha on Yom Kippur, the afternoon service in Yom Kippur, which is sort of the pinnacle, or should be at least, of your experience in Kedusha, in this holy experience, this holy day. We're reading about all the naughty things you shouldn't be doing. Why are we reading that?
Right? On Yom Kippur, you mean? Why are we reading this?
What's that?
You're asking the question, why are we reading this specific Parsha on Yom Kippur of all days versus a different holiday?
Because it's correct. All those things are correct. And some Yom Kippur doesn't not, unfortunately, it does not atone for correct.
I would think that it has to do with relationships, right? Like the importance of proper relationships. So, for example, Shir Hashirim is called like the Holy of Holies, right? And it's about the relationship of a man and to a woman, and that's supposed to be like our relationship to Hashem, where we're the bride and Hashem is the groom. So if that's considered like the Holy of Holies, then that means that these types of relationships that are the opposite are more detrimental. So like in the same way that a proper relationship is very holy, the exact opposite is very unholy.
That's a good answer. Very good answers. I like that. Let's see if I'm going to say something a little different, but I don't disagree with anything you've been saying. So very good. But let's start off with a bit of an enigma. And it's the opening line of the Parsha of Aharey, chapter 16, verse 1. V'yidaber Hashem, see there, V'yidaber Hashem and Moshe, God spoke to Moshe, Aharey, after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they came close before Hashem and they died.
That's strange. I thought the whole point was to get close to Hashem. Why are you dying? Because you're getting close to Hashem.
Oh, okay. That's an excellent question. Absolutely.
Strange way to say it, isn't it? Shouldn't it say because they did something wrong and that's the reason why they died? Why do you say because they came close to Hashem? That doesn't sound good. I thought the whole point is to be close.
Right. Very good. Very good. Very good. So that's a phenomenal question. Hold on to that question, because I think the process of what we're going to go through, we're going to see the answer. But let me read you Rashi. Rashi says something very strange, because Rashi is bothered. The death of Aaron's two sons has already happened, and we've already covered it. So why is it brought up here when Moshe is coming to teach Aaron the service on Yom Kippur?
Isn't that a little bit cruel to bring it up again?
Exactly. Way to go. That's it. You hear what he just said?
Yes, it's a relationship question.
What do you mean?
If you care about a relationship, that's the question you would ask. Isn't it kind of cruel to bring this?
Right. Right. Imagine like sitting down with somebody who lost a very close, lost a child, right? Right. And say, listen, you need to, I don't know, be careful, whatever it happens to be, right? Because you don't want to die like your kid. Whoa.
Yeah, that's a big ouch.
That's a big ouch, right? So listen to what Rashi says. Well, what is it doing here? So he says like this.
Which verse of Rashi?
Number
The
one.
first one, the very first one, right? Yudaber Shem Moshe. Ma Talmud, what is this teaching us? Hayavavi Eliezer ben Azariah, right? Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, he gives a parable to a sick person that is visited by a doctor. Amaloi, the doctor says to him, Al tachol sonin, don't eat radishes. I think sonin, cold food, sonin. But al tishka b'tachal, don't lie in a cold, damp place, right? Okay, very good. Ba'acher, another doctor comes and he says to him, don't eat cold food and don't sleep in a cold, damp place, right?
Mm-hmm.
You follow? Because you don't want to die like Joe did, right? Who ate cold food and slept in a cold, damp place, right? So he says, "Zezazu yotem rishon." The second doctor is more motivating, right, than the first one. Therefore, it says, Therefore, it says, right, when Moshe is instructed to tell Aaron what to do with the Yom Kippur service, he says, after the death of the two sons of Aaron. Which leads us to our question, like that's a little bit hard that Moshe is going to tell Aaron. Like normally, if God hadn't said this, if the Torah hadn't said this, so then Moshe would have said, listen, this is what you do on Yom Kippur, right? But now he's going to say to him, right, this is what you do on Yom Kippur. And if you're not careful, you're going to die like your two kids died.
That has a much bigger impact.
Right. There's a much impact, right? You follow? Now, I'm going to point out one big difficulty, and that will open up to another big difficulty. That's not called zrizus. Zrizus is alacrity. Translates as alacrity.
This is zehirus.
Zehirus. Very good.
He's on a roll tonight.
He's on a roll. I don't know what you're smoking. I'll have some of that. Right? It's zehirus. It's being careful. And Rashi says the second doctor is more motivating than the first doctor, and that's not true. He makes him more cautious, but he doesn't motivate him more.
I don't know. That anytime you start talking about, I don't know. It is more motivating to me because if you're just saying it as, oh, okay, here's some information, rather than this is information. Oh, by the way, this is how so and so passed away. Right. So it's bringing it to a much more practical, more impactful example.
That's right, but it's making you more cautious. It's not motivating. It's not motivating you to be more motivated. It's getting you to be careful. In other words, you're playing around with a nuclear power plant. Be very careful. Not more motivated. That's what Rashi should have said. It's actually what he does say in Parsha Tzav. We had this a little while ago, a few Parshas ago. And there he says, right, you have to stress to Aaron to give him zehirus, so you should be careful. But here he says zrizus.
Because it's more than just being careful then. If he's saying zrizus, then it must mean that it's not just about caution, it's about having the right enthusiastic mindset or something when you're doing the Yom Kippur service, because you have to have a different mindset, not one of caution, but one of some other type of behavior, something a little bit higher standard, right?
That's exactly right. Very good. So what so how do you answer this? How do you answer this problem? So you see, if you look closely to what Rashi is saying or what the Parsha is saying, the Torah isn't saying, which is how a lot of people read it, that God, V'yidaber Hashem el Moshe, and God spoke to Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they brought an offering when they came close to God and died.
Oh, it's in the act of coming close that you have to have a certain standard of behavior. Is that what you're saying?
That's true. But God isn't. Why is the Parsha telling us? Why is the Almighty telling Moshe to speak to Aaron and referencing the two sons of Aaron's death? See, people think what he means, what the Parsha is telling us here, is that Moshe is saying, God is telling Moshe, tell Aaron to be careful so he doesn't die like his two sons.
But meanwhile, it's actually referencing how they died rather than, right? Isn't that what it's referenced? Because they kirov bikaravatam.
Let me put it differently, right? We all have, if you're a parent, you feel a responsibility that your children get their act together. And that act together can be different things to different people, but nevertheless, we use the generic term to get their act together. Right? Now, that doesn't mean you tell your children to get their act together.
No. Although you might sometimes say it out of frustration.
You might say that out of frustration, right? But your fear of them, let's say, not wearing a seatbelt or brushing their teeth or doing their homework or all those things, right? Of all the, like your awareness of, let's say, the homeless people, right? Or the, all the problems of society that happens from people who don't do what they should do.
Are you helping them to avoid the negative ramifications of a certain negative habit?
That's true, but you see, you have an awareness of all the problems that happen if they don't play the game properly.
Whereas they may not.
They certainly don't have. So now that your awareness of those problems, what does it create in them?
Nothing. Right, because they don't have the same awareness. It doesn't give them any motivation to do what needs to be done.
Why?
Because they're not aware of what the negative ramifications are of them not doing what they're supposed to.
But what does it do in you?
In me, it gets me all riled up.
That's Jesus.
That's Rizus? What, the fact that I'm riled up on their behalf?
That's right. Their Zehirus, their need to be careful is your Zrizus, is your motivation.
And my motivation comes from a place of being aware of what the negative ramifications are.
That's right.
So wouldn't it just be better to give them the same motivation that I have, so that I don't have to be on top of them?
That would be true, but you often can't do that. You can't tell your 3-year-old, if you don't eat your greens, you'll be anorexic or whatever. Doesn't work. Your awareness of the problems of not brushing their teeth creates your zrizus, your motivation. That's what the Rashi is coming to tell you is going on here. God isn't telling Moshe to tell Aaron that he's got to be careful because his children died. God is telling Moshe that if you don't teach Aaron properly, the same thing will happen again.
Oh, and this time it will be your brother who you're so close to.
Your brother or his children, whoever.
Right.
That's how to read the pasuk.
Is it suggesting that perhaps Moshe had not prepared everybody properly to begin with?
that's another step. It could say that, and that might be, that could be the influence with Aaron's two sons. But nevertheless, he's telling him here. They went off on their own. They didn't seek permission for what they did.
Mm.
But now we come to a beginning of an understanding of why our sages Chazal put into the afternoon service of Yom Kippur these forbidden relationships. It was their understanding of what can go wrong when you come close to God creates in them a zrizas to make sure we understand. In the same way that your understanding of what can go wrong with children causes you to be motivated to make sure they don't cross any lines.
Okay, maybe I'm a little bit slow tonight, but I'm not sure I understand. Are you saying that it's the rabbis who indicated which parsha we end up saying, and the reason why they brought up this parsha is because they have a stronger awareness of everything that could go wrong if anybody comes anywhere near these forbidden relationships?
Well, they understand that the reason these forbidden relationships are in there, in this week's parsha, this mentioning the service on Yom Kippur is hinting to us that you need to be aware of what can go wrong. It can go really out of like God is warning Moshe. If you don't do it, if you don't teach him right, if he doesn't understand it properly, not just the specific actions to do, but the mindset to have, then it can really go out of whack. You can really have some big problems.
For some reason, this is like giving me like echoes of the first incident that was a big problem after they went into the land of Israel and Binyamin was almost wiped out. What is that called? The incident of the concubine of Gibor or something?
Gibor, the Giva.
Right. Oh, yes.
Right.
Why is that reminding me of that? I don't know. Was it something to do with the fact that maybe the families of Binyamin did not take seriously the negative impact that the surrounding nations were having on their youth? I thought that was the reason. Never mind. I'm just having one of these moments.
Okay, these moments are good. Okay, so let's get back. So now to kind of bring this out more, we need to appreciate what Kedusha is all about.
Uh-huh.
So we tend to think that Kedusha, if you saw my little blurb meme that I put out, I think it was yesterday, right? That you can go to, anyone watching this, go to my LinkedIn account or Facebook account or Instagram account, and it's got a meme of somebody jumping out of an airplane. It says, if you think jumping out of a plane is a thrill, then you don't know how to wake up in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to understand what Kedusha is. So there's Rav Noach's father had this kasha, this famous question, and he asked like this, that it says that when Hannah was praying in the Mishkan, so she was whispering, and Eli the Kohen Gadol went up to her because he thought she was drunk.
Mm-hmm.
He said to her, "You can't drink in the Mishkan." Mm-hmm. So Rav Noach's father asked this great question. I don't know actually how famous it is, but it's a great question. Right? Why would you think she's drunk just because she's whispering?
Because for everybody else doing Shemona Esrei, they were screaming in delight.
That's true, right? But that's not just, that would not just be true in the Mishkan, that would be everywhere. But it wasn't everywhere.
How was she able to contain that level of energy if she's in communication with God? Because if you're saying they were really affected emotionally, how is she able to whisper?
So that's the Kiddush that Hannah's teaching us. That is possible. She teaches a new way of dealing with Kedusha. But what it's telling you is that you couldn't experience the Mishkan without that thrill. In other words, you couldn't jump out of an aeroplane and whisper. You'd be screaming.
Mm-hmm.
Why do people scream on roller coasters?
Because it's scary.
It's not just scary, it's a thrill. Right? It's not a scary like a danger kind of scary, right? That tends to make you go quiet. It's a thrilling excitement kind of thrill. You follow?
Yes.
So now it's telling you that the experiencing that is heart pumping. It's like jumping out of an aeroplane. Now, why is that? So the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, it says like this: that God created the world with 10 sayings, right? That there be light, etc., etc. Right? If you read the Parsha's Parsha, you see there's 10 sayings. That there be a rakia, that there be some. Right? There's 10 sayings. So the Mishnah asks, why do you need 10? Why don't you just say abracadabra, hey presto, right? Whatever, and just it gets the whole universe. Why do you need 10 sayings? So it says to punish the evil people who destroy the world with 10 sayings, and to reward the righteous who save the world with 10 sayings. Now what does that mean?
Sounds cryptic.
It is totally cryptic. So you see that it's very, very difficult to mess up your life. We've talked about this a number of times. This is the source for it. So when your kids first learn to ride a bicycle, what do? You put training wheels on, right? You put them on helmets and you pad everything, right? New first baby, first parent, when you have your first child, everything's got padding on it. Right? But the third child, it's like, okay, they'll play in the street. It's okay, I'm sure the cars see him, right? Right? Well, look, it's because it's like you get used to it. But we try and mitigate the dangers of life and pad against the dangers of life, so that if they do mess up, they do fall down, they won't hurt themselves. Well, God does the same thing. He created 10 sayings because when you get out of the 10 sayings, when you get out of the 10 layers of the world, you hit immense danger. Like the first astronauts that went into outer space encountered this. That they were kind of surprised and thrown off. It took a lot more. They realized they needed a lot more training to how to deal with outer space. And they came up with this saying: there's no problem you can't get into in outer space, but if you don't know what you're doing, will get very, very bad very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that when you're on Earth, terra firma, problems do not spiral out of control very quickly. This world has got lots of padding in it. God created a world that is very hard to mess up. You have to keep going through 10 layers. Like, I've dealt with people who tell me they're going to commit suicide. I've had it a few times. I've had students like this, right? And although I take it seriously, obviously you have to, but nevertheless, it's not as easy as they think it is. There are 10 layers you have to go through. People do it, that's true. Right? But it's not as easy as people think. That's how it works.
So what do you end up telling them?
Well, we got to talk to them, but the Almighty created the world with these 10 layers. It's very hard to mess up. You really have to be motivated to cross all and that goes not only for life, it goes for marriage, it goes for parenting, it goes for all the important things. Right?
Then how would you answer a person that says, well, how's that the case? Because look how many broken families there are, and look how many, etc., etc. Like, if you can't mess it up, then why are there so many kids with so many horrendous problems, and families that are broken, etc. That seems like a big mess up.
What's that?
That seems like a big mess up.
It's not as big as mess up as you think it is. But what's the mess is the family they're coming from. Now, this isn't always the case, but what they're rejecting is the family they grew up in, or the life they grew up in, that's unhealthy or doesn't fit their neshama. And so they're looking for something better, meaningful, or real.
Mm-hmm.
So it's don't get me wrong, there are people like really do some terrible things to their lives, but it's not as common as we think it is. It was just the fact that people say they messed up. What do you mean they messed up? Well, he was supposed to go to college and to become a high-powered lawyer on Wall Street to sue, grandmas and repossess their homes, and he gave it all up to sell the world and connect with nature. Okay.
I mean, more like, the kid ended up going on drugs and, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, no, I understand, right? But a lot of people are just decrying these mess ups, but what are they messing up from? Like, what was the life that they gave up, that they went off on this derech? And invariably, when you look into it, which I've done, I haven't done it in every case, obviously, but when I have done it, invariably, and there are exceptions, but invariably, the family that they're coming out of was a mess.
So even in a situation where a child might become a drug addict, it's because there's something very wrong within the family that they're trying to escape.
Right, and they'll all tell you that. I spent a lot of time in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's what they all say. They grew up in this family and that family, and it was so painful. Right, that's a big theme of my book, that that human beings do not do pain. There's no such thing as being tough by a human being. If they aren't enjoying life, they're going to seek comfort somewhere. But anyway, we digress tremendously.
Okay.
So getting back, so reality is a thrill, but it's also incredibly dangerous. The further away you get from walking around on the street, the more dangerous it becomes. You're taking away another layer. So roller skates, bicycles, cars, airplanes, spaceships, every stage further away from the physical reality, jumping out of a plane, right? But what you're doing is you're connecting to you're taking away the layers, and you're connecting to the real reality, which is a connection with God. And that's the thrill.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why people do it. Why are you jumping out of a plane? Because you're trying to remove the layers in the same way that a child takes off the training wheels. Why do you take off the training wheels? You'll be safer then. They don't want to be safer. They want to connect more to reality.
They want to be like other grown-up kids and be on a real bike.
I understand that, but there is part of that going on too. But why do they all do that? What's the appeal of riding a thing that's more dangerous than walking?
I never really thought of it that way. It's a lot of fun being on a bike.
Right, that's exactly the point. There's a lot of fun in bungee jumping. But what exactly is the fun?
Yeah, that one is hard for me to.
Right, because you're removing the layers in the same way that somebody has a near-death experience. You're removing the layers. When you remove the layers, you connect to the source of existence, the Almighty, and it's an incredible thrill.
Yeah, maybe they should do ads, like Jewish ads that say, instead of bungee jumping, get your real thrill while davening.
That's exactly
what you were saying, right?
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. I used to have an advert like that when I was running the branch. Right? Come to, if you're davening, if you're praying, it isn't a great thrill, you're missing out. Something like that, because I've worded it. But 100%, that's what you said. That's what Eli is coming to tell. How can you say you're talking, you're here, right? And everyone's going crazy. They're all jumping out of planes. Well, that's what Yom Kippur is. You're removing the layers.
You're getting closer to God.
You're getting closer to God. It's an incredible thrill.
Interesting.
So to be able to counteract the incredible thrill, they mention the areas you have to be zrizut about.
They mention what?
To counteract the incredible thrill, you have to mention the areas of zrizut, of zehirut.
What do you mean?
You have to mention the sexual
The inappropriate
relationships.
No, so now we're gonna get. First, we started off with the pasuk is the beginning that says you gotta be careful, because as you get closer to this great thrill, right, you can easily mess up. It's in the
so there's no padding anymore.
There's no padding anymore.
Okay. I don't know why it took me so long to get that.
Right? You jump out of a plane, you don't do it right. Like there's a guy, you can look it up on YouTube, there's a guy who jumped out of a plane 25,000 feet up without a parachute.
Eze meshugas.
Right? So what did he do? As the joke goes, you don't need a parachute if you want to go skydiving. You just need a parachute if you want to go skydiving twice.
How did he survive if he jumped out of a plane at 25,000 feet?
So they arranged ahead of time, thank God, a net that he had to hit.
That's super terrifying.
Right, it's 100 feet wide, this net, and from when he jumped out, it was a dot. It's just a little dot.
Yeah.
But he had to, direct himself to this net. No small thing. Obviously, he's a pro. He knows what he's doing. But nevertheless, right? Now the question is, what difference does it make? Like, why? Okay, so you have a little bit longer with it and free fall, right? You have a little bit longer, but again? Because the more when I was a teenager, skiing was 2 skis, and that was fine. Now it's 1 ski. Why do you have to keep pushing the barrier? Because when you touch, it's sort of like going to a great restaurant. When you have a great experience, you don't want less of it. You want more of it. It draws you in.
That's crazy. That's just crazy.
Why?
The whole craziness about jumping without a parachute, even if you are a professional, the things that could go wrong. I mean,
Yes, but you see, why do people do it? Because they don't have that thrill in their lives. You have the thrill in your life, so you don't need it.
Have a kid, for heaven's sake.
What's that?
Have a child,
Exactly. 100%. 100%.
You want to feel that whatever. Have a child. Have responsibility for a life.
That's what I say to people. I don't like roller coasters, because if I want to feel like I'm going to die, I just have kids. The same feeling. The difference is that kids are cute. You come off the roller coaster, it's like you feel sick. I don't need that. I never liked roller coasters. Okay, so now, right now, see, we're getting closer, right? So, and this pasuk is starting to make more sense. But be careful because they're becoming closer. Aaron's going to become very close. He's going to have this incredible thrill. And just like his kids had this incredible thrill, as you get closer to the great thrill, you want more. You want to peel the onion further. You want to take off more and more layers. You don't want less and less. If you jumped out of a plane, right, next year you're not going to jump out of you're not going to jump out of off a bridge. You're going to have a higher plane. Right? It's going to be more, how can I make this faster?
It's addictive, you're sort of saying.
It's addictive. You climb one mountain, you want a higher mountain. The new sport now is not that new, but new in terms of 30 years old, is to climb mountains without ropes.
Oh my gosh. Can you stop with all these anxiety-producing examples?
Right. So what's the same view?
Oh my God.
It's not the view that they're trying to get. It's the connections. It's the removal of it's not death they're trying to connect to. It's the lack of the life that is associated with living on earth. Now they're trying to connect to when you peel off the layers, what do you have left? That's what they're trying to connect to. Now, if you have Torah, you understand that the Torah is built in this experience. Torah itself is the connection because the Torah is the mind of God. It's the most purest connection to that thrill you can possibly get. In the same way that the way you connect with another person is through their mind. It's just a physical experience. It has very limited joy out of it. If you connect with somebody just for looks, you marry just for looks, it's very limited experience.
Mm-hmm.
You don't love someone just for looks. It has to have, I'm not saying looks is a bad thing, but it has to have the dimension that the personality is something I can connect to. Otherwise, there's nothing there. Well, all the more so, the Almighty. So as much as they're having a thrill jumping out of a plane because they're connecting with God, because they're removing the physical world, the barriers, the buffers, it will be more of an experience if they're connecting with the Almighty in who God to the degree more the greater degree possible in his thinking. That's Torah. That's davening.
Oh my goodness. Is it true that when people do things like this, it's like an avodah zarah?
Well, it's the experience what avodah zarah would give people.
So really, I mean, it seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like it's like they're re-seeking that desire to connect to something deeper that we used to have before we asked Hashem to remove the desire of avodah zarah.
Sorry, say that again.
In other words, there used to be a thrill associated with doing avodah zarah or connecting to God, either or, right? One was the opposite of the other, but still they got a thrill. So isn't jumping out of the plane and climbing mountains without safety harness, isn't that similar to like trying to connect to a deeper relationship without actually investing in the relationship? In other words, in order to connect to God through this,
right,
through Torah and davening, that requires real effort of yourself, not just your time, but who you are. Whereas when you do these dangerous things, yourself is not really involved. It's your body, that's true, but not who you are as a person.
Right. In the same way that, excuse the expression, and we're going to get into this, a prostitute is not a meaningful, cannot possibly be a meaningful relationship like marriage.
Right.
but it has aspects of it that give it a certain thrill.
Attraction.
It's a person, there are things there that make it that give it a thrill. So it's obviously not meaningful in the sense in anything like what a real relationship is. But the same way Avodah Zarah is the same kind of experience.
It's like they want the icing without the actual cake.
Right.
They want the sugar without the cake. Yeah. That's interesting.
So now we come to a very interesting Gemara. So the Gemara says like this: that when the temple was destroyed, it took the taste, the tam of marriage, of relations in a marriage, and put it into Averos.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You follow?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
It means the depth of marriage was removed. The depth and joy, maybe, of marriage was removed. I don't know. I feel like we've had this conversation before, but I can't remember the details.
You see, every human being intuits that there's more to life than this. In the same way that a child knows that it's more pleasurable to ride a bicycle without training wheels on. But the more you remove the layers, the greater the thrill. Everybody intuits that. They just don't know where it is. Mm-hmm. So when we had a Beis Hamikdash, you walk in there, go, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is that in the same way that someone jumps out of a plane and lands and says, well, this is it. So we can tell by their expression that there is something there, and that's what makes people do it. Mm-hmm. If you walked out the Beis Hamikdash and you said, this is it, and you meant it, and you couldn't mean it unless you experienced it, everybody would be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a Kiddush Hashem is. When Onkelos walked out of his house and he kissed the mezuzah, so the Roman legions who were with him wanted to know, what did you just do?
Right, because that was such a strange thing. The way he probably also did it, had probably with such reverence, was even stranger to them.
Not just stranger, but you could tell he jumped out of a plane.
Oh, he was having an amazing experience, you're saying.
He was having an amazing experience. So he said, what did you just do? In other words, any reasonable person, if he didn't know any better, would say jumping out of a plane is for stupid people. And it might be. but why do people do these things, and how did it start? Where does it come from? Because intuitively we know it's the buffers that stop us from holding us back from having the experience.
You know, I just realized what you're saying. I feel like we may have talked about this before, but like Onkelos, probably as he was kissing the mezuzah, he was connecting to God and connecting to that feeling of being held or protected or taken care of by God, as what the mezuzah says or is representing.
Right.
And that's probably what they observed as he kissed the mezuzah.
Right.
That this amazing feeling.
Exactly.
And they're like, what? How do you have this amazing feeling from some small little box attached to your doorpost?
Well, I don't know that they would say it like that because everything objectively is crazy. See, jumping out of a plane should be like, are you off your rocker? In the same way, going down a mountain with one ski is like, what are you doing? Right? But it doesn't seem strange to us because we intuit that it's removing the barriers is where the thrill is, where life is. The more barriers you have, the safer you make your life, the more miserable you become.
So you're saying it wasn't strange to them?
If you met somebody who's experienced it, it doesn't become strange.
Oh, because you're seeing how happy they are.
Right, you see it. Right, exactly.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. So it would be more of not, oh, this is so strange, but oh, this is so curious and interesting. How is it that you're feeling this amazing feeling?
Right.
Thank you for clarifying that. For some reason, I needed that clarity.
Right. So now, when the base of Mikdash is destroyed, so everybody wants to know where it is. So the clue is it's not anywhere that you can get to. In other words, God created a safe world in the same way that your parents or parents create a safe environment. Like I just took my grandchildren to a playground here, right? Mm-hmm. And these aren't playgrounds like I grew up on. These are playgrounds that the floor is like padding, you jump,
I grew up on the same playgrounds that you did. We didn't have padding and all this rubber stuff to protect
all this rubber stuff, right? And okay, I'm not. They don't want to get sued. I understand that. I understand that, right? But we experience life with the padding, and we know it's not in the padding. It's got to be somewhere where it's removed, like a plane, like a bicycle. That wherever you go outside of wherever you make life more dangerous, where there is you have to cross a line, that's where you find the thrill.
I'm sorry, I have a very hard time relating to a lot of these examples because as someone who's like very sensitive and like I avoid those things as much as possible. Like I even just talking about it causes anxiety in me.
That's good. That's good. That's the way we should be. That's exactly right. Because it's crazy. because clearly we're meant to have that thrill, and obviously God wouldn't want us to have it for jumping out of an airplane. Like that would be stupid. Right? So he wants us to have it by going into shul, sitting down on a nice bench, right? Mm-hmm. Opening up a siddur and connecting. Mm-hmm. But most of the world, that's not available to them.
Right.
Now, if you're living a fairly healthy life, then you have sufficient thrill in your life that you don't need to jump out of an airplane.
In other words, do you have enough challenges?
Not just challenges, but you have enough thrill in your life. You might not call it thrill, but you have enough thrill in your life, enough connection with God in your life that you don't need any. You're fine. You don't need the jumping out of an airplane. In other words, who are the people jumping out of a plane? They don't have anything in their life, so they're willing to try it. You have to have it's sort of like if you're really broke, you're willing to risk gambling, right? Because you've got nothing to lose.
Right. So you're saying that if they had, a large family that depended on them, they're less likely to go on the plane, jump out without a parachute, and try to aim for a small little net.
Not just the large family dependent on them, the large family that was loving and caring and giving and sweet and precious to them, they wouldn't feel the need for it. Now, this is a plus and a minus. It's a plus because you're not jumping out of an airplane. It's a minus because you're not really trying to have a higher. There's no end to how great a thrill you can have in your day.
But if you're just kind of going through it sort of without putting the time and effort, then you're not going to get the thrill.
You're not going to get the thrill. Part of the reason is you just don't realize it's there.
Mm-hmm.
When do you realize it's there?
When it's almost gone. When it's threatened.
That's true. But it's built into Judaism.
You mean like Yom Kippur and things Kippur. Like that?
On Yom Kippur, you find out, oh, there's more.
Yeah, but that's only because you're like, oh, my fate is being sealed for the coming year.
That's Rosh Hashanah. Yom Kippur is part of that, but that's not just that's part of the whole experience. Remember, danger is part of is implicit thrill. So therefore, it has to have is part and parcel with the judgment is the thrill. So that's why they're all in there. But when do you have this incredible experience on Yom Kippur? And the question everybody has is, after they left the base of Mikdash and it's destroyed, where is it now? So it must be in the places that are difficult to get to.
Oh, that's why you're saying that the Tom has now been in the Averos.
The Tom is in the place you're not supposed to even touch.
So we're circling back to the inappropriate relationships that we started with.
The Garden of Eden. You're not even supposed to touch the tree. Oh, that must be where it is.
In the forbidden.
In the forbidden. I'm not supposed to go there. I'm not supposed to climb Mount Everest. I'm not made to jump out of an aeroplane. This is not how life is supposed to be. That must be where it is.
It's so backwards.
That's true. But there is an element of truth there. As you go through Europe, you'll see buildings that took 500 years to build.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine like you're going to do some renovations on your house.
500 years? No, thank you. I could barely get through the ones that we did do.
I know how you feel. We just finished our house. It goes on forever. Right? But what motivation is there for somebody to build a building? Someone had to pay for that building. Right? Someone had to design that building.
You have to believe that it's something that will be beautiful and will last through the test of time.
Well, that's true, but because they know it's going to take 500 years to build.
Then you're thinking that it's such a grand goal, and you want to be part of something so big and great.
Of something so difficult, you can't even live to see it.
Oh.
You're not supposed to go to the top of Mount Everest. The reason why it's so inhospitable is because you're not supposed to be there. That's where I have to go. It must be up there.
Yeah.
So that's why we have all these inappropriate relationships. We read about them. It's not here. It's not in these places. Where is the greatest thrill you're going to find?
It's supposed to be in the real relationship that's appropriate.
That's right, in your marriage. But why don't people work on it? Because they don't think it's there.
Wow. That's the only reason?
That's the only reason.
I thought it's because they don't know how.
They don't know how because they don't learn. Because they don't learn because they don't think it's there.
You're saying that if they did think that it was there, then they would make the effort. Oh, it's sort of like Mishle. They will make the effort to find it like treasure, like gold, like silver.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, that makes sense. So why is the Tom no longer in marriage? Because the Beis HaMikdash is no longer there because we don't feel the Shekhinah?
Because we're looking for that greater thrill.
Right.
Right? And it must be somewhere where we're not supposed to go. And those things are antithetical to a meaningful relationship.
It's so backwards. Everything is so upside down.
Yes.
Sorry, Rabbi. Go ahead. Sorry.
No.
That's it. Parsha Kedoshim.
Right, that's Aharey Kedoshim. That's how they all tie. That's how they tie these two parshas. That's how these two parshas are tied together. Because Kedusha is the ultimate experience. That's what we're all trying to get there. It's such a tragic thing that people think it's in secular life. The secular life has nothing to offer people except marketing. They lie. They tell you drive this car and you'll have an incredible thrill.
Yeah, I remember once seeing an ad for a car. I can't remember which car it was, and they used the word elevate. I'm like, really? You're gonna be elevated through a car experience. It's doing the same thing. I don't care how smooth the ride is, how supple the leather is. You're not being elevated, my friends. So this is such a horrible ad because it's such an obvious lie to me.
Right, but that's all they have to offer. Unfortunately, we don't market Judaism.
I was going to say that next. Like, why aren't we doing that?
Because the only way to market is like Unkelus did.
Oh, you have to live it so that other people notice it, and they'll be like, "Hey, what's going on over here?"
Right. What are they smoking?
Interesting.
In Kedoshim, I see it begins and ends with almost the same phrase.
That's right.
Except it also adds about the Ov and Yidoni.
Yeah, right. But it's all about people seeking these ultimate experiences. It's in the same way Aharey Mos does. You're not going to find it in these ultimate experiences.
So when you say you have to live it, that's exactly what's meant by Kedoshim Tihiyu. You shall be holy. You need to live it.
Right.
And that's what our whole destiny is like you were supposed to be a holy nation and priests. Like, so wow, that's a huge responsibility. It's just so much easier to like target advertising and branding.
No, it's not just the responsibility. See, when you take Kedusha as like, be good, don't cross anything, don't mess around, just right. When you think Kedusha, then it's a responsibility. But if you read Kedusha as have the greatest thrill of existence, walk around in thrill, wake up in the morning as though you just jumped out of an airplane. When you translate Kedusha like that, that's what the Torah is saying. Live like that. That's the way to live.
Wow, my thinking is so responsibility based.
Well,
rather than fun based.
That's the world we live in, unfortunately.
Really? We live in a world that's more responsibility based than fun based?
Yes, right. Yeah.
How do you figure? I don't see that everywhere.
Because we think that that's what Judaism is.
Oh, you're saying in the Jewish world we have that mentality.
Because we get it from the secular, non-Jewish world. But it's the Christian world. Religious people are so boring.
That's sad. Religious people are so boring.
It is totally sad. Totally sad.
Hi.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
This is a lot of thoughts, a lot of things to think about.
That's where I get the big bucks.
I thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, all the best. Bye.